What's up everyone, Erik here, and welcome to Hardware for Gamers. Now what we got here is the Corsair 275R Airflow. The 275R Airflow is an ATX mid-tower gaming case. Now this case comes in black or white. Now I'll be taking a look at the white version today, so let's get into this. Now before I get into the overview, I do buy all the products that I review myself. So if you like what I'm doing here, can you please hit that like button and share this video? It helps out the channel a lot. And speaking of helping out the channel, I also have an Amazon Associates link. So if you click on the link in the description and then add something into cart and order it, the channel will get a small kickback. Now the dimensions of the 275R Airflow are 45.5 centimeters high by 21.5 centimeters wide by 46 centimeters deep and weighs 6.9 kilograms. The 275R does come with a small box that has the screws and fittings in it. There are also some zip ties. There is also a small booklet. It seems to be the user guide and/or manual, but it's really not much help. The 275R Airflow has a front plastic panel that Corsair believes is optimized for airflow. This front panel does easily come off by pulling the bottom of the panel away from the chassis. The front I/O is not attached to the front panel, so there is no need to worry about damaging any of the cables. Now taking a closer look at the panel, there is no dust filter on the panel. Rather, the dust filter is on the front of the chassis, covering 2 of the 3 pre-installed fans. This dust filter is held in by magnets, so it is quite easy to remove it and clean it, which is nice to see. Now looking at the front I/O, there is a combo port for the audio out and microphone. There are also 2 USB 3.0 ports, a reset button, and a power button. There is also a large magnetic dust filter on the top of the case. The color match really isn't too bad, at least on the white version. Now moving to the rear of the case, we see the location for the rear I/O and a 120mm pre-installed exhaust fan. There are 7 expansion slots, all with reusable covers. The 275R Airflow has 2 vertical expansion slots, but these 2 covers are break off or breakaway covers, and you will need to buy a PCI riser cable to actually properly use them. And finally, we see the power supply location. Moving on to the bottom of the case, there are 4 plastic feet. These feet allow for 22mm of ventilation, and the feet do have rubber pads to help stop the case from sliding around. There is also a removable dust filter for the power supply. This dust filter is accessed from the rear of the case. However, I still need to lift up the back of the case to be able to get my fingers in far enough to be able to pull the filter down and out. Moving on to the right side panel, it is steel. And to remove the right side panel, you need to undo the 2 captive thumb screws at the rear of the case, and then slide the panel back and lift it away. The right side panel feels rigid enough. Now the left side panel is tempered glass and is held in by 4 thumb screws. To remove the glass panel, you should slide the case onto its side, undo all 4 thumb screws, and then lift the panel away. Now taking a look at the inside of the case, there is a basement. The top of the shroud has 2 cutouts for running cables, one of which is grommeted. Now the shroud does extend the entire depth of the case along the side, but along the top of the shroud there is an opening at the front to allow for 3 front fans or even a 360 AIO. The motherboard tray does have a number of cutouts. Along the top there are cutouts for the EPS cable and for fan headers, but most of your cables will be running through the 2 grommeted cutouts. Now the 275R Airflow does support mini ITX, micro ATX, and ATX motherboards. The max GPU length is 370mm, and that is with the fan being there, but it will be cut down if you go with a front mounted radiator. The maximum CPU cooler height in the 275R is 170mm. Okay, time to turn the case around and look at the back side of the motherboard tray. We see 2 2.5-inch drive sleds. There is also tooling for 2 more 2.5-inch drives near the front of the case. There are also a lot of cable tie-offs all over the back side of the motherboard tray. Now the front side of the motherboard tray does have a slight build out, which allows for 18mm to run cables, with 16mm given at the rear. Now looking at the basement, there is a 2-bay drive cage with sleds. These sleds can hold either a 2.5-inch or a 3.5-inch drive, which means you can actually have 6 2.5-inch drives in this case. Now they don't actually give you the screws to install 6, But if you go with 2 screws for each drive, you'll have plenty. So in its stock configuration, there is 230 millimeters given for the power supply and cables. Now, if you don't need it or want it, the drive cage can be removed. You will need to remove 5 screws. There are 4 screws on the bottom of the case and 1 on the backside of the motherboard tray. Now, by removing the drive cage, there will then be 410 millimeters for the power supply and cables. But that will be cut down if you go with a 360 millimeter radiator or a third front intake fan. Moving on to the cooling for the 275R airflow. This version does come with 3 120mm fans pre-installed. That's 2 intake fans at the front with 1 exhaust fan at the rear. Now the 275R airflow can support up to 6 120mm fans. That's 3 fans at the front, 2 fans along the top, and 1 fan at the rear. Now if you prefer to have 140mm fans, then you can have up to 3 140mm fans and 1 120mm fan. So that's 2 140mm fans at the front and 1 140mm along the top, with the rear still being a 120mm fan. Now for radiator support, you can have up to a 360 or a 280 at the front, or up to a 240 along the top, and or a 120 at the rear. Now this is just a side note, but I wanted to point out that one of the slotted connections on the right side panel was damaged, so the panel wasn't sliding correctly. Now this was an easy fix. I just used a flathead screwdriver and bent it back into place. Now I'm not sure how something like this would have happened, but it did, so I just wanted to point it out. And that's it for the overview. So now I need to actually build the test system and do some testing. Okay, it is the next day and all my testing is done, but I just wanted to add in that the 275R airflow is an updated version of the 275R. And for the most part, these cases are the same, with the notable changes being the front panel and dust filter. The 275R airflow also comes with 3 pre-installed fans rather than just the 2 that come with the 275R. The 275R airflow also has additional fan and radiator support. And Corsair also decided to ditch the Allen key for the screws on the tempered glass panel. Now, before I get into the temperature charts, if you do have any questions about my case testing method, please check the card above, and that should answer most of your questions. But if you do have any questions, just leave them down in the comments and I'll get to them. So starting with the CPU testing, with the 3 pre-installed fans, the 275R airflow had the max CPU temperature reach 55.5 Celsius. Now in the fan normalized test, the max CPU temperature reached 52.6 Celsius, which is the same as the 3 stock fans with 1 additional exhaust fan located along the top. And when I removed the front panel and dust filters, the max CPU temperature dropped to 51.3 Celsius, which indicates that the front panel and dust filters are not restricting the airflow to the CPU in any meaningful way. Now, when comparing the CPU temperatures to the other cases I've tested, the 275R airflow in its stock configuration did very well, beating out the NR400 for the top spot. And when comparing the CPU temperatures in the fan normalized test, the 275R airflow is, I guess, in second place, with the 3 cases at the top being tied. Now for the GPU testing, the 275R airflow in its stock configuration had the max GPU temperature at 59 Celsius. By adding 1 additional exhaust fan along the top, brought that temperature down to 55.3 Celsius. And in the fan normalized test, the max GPU temperature dropped to 53.5 Celsius. Now, when I removed the front panel and dust filters, the GPU temperature dropped to 51.3 Celsius, which indicates that the front panel and dust filters are not restricting the airflow to the GPU. Now, when comparing the GPU temperature of the 275R airflow to the other cases I've tested, its stock configuration again performed very well, beating out the Focus G for the top spot. And in the fan normalized test, it clearly took second place after the Focus G. So what do I think of the 275R Airflow? The build quality is really quite good. It can actually hold up to 6 drives, which is absolutely insane. Now, I can see some people having issues with the way the front panel looks. I personally don't like it or hate it. It's kind of in that middle ground. I do like that there is the color option, so you can actually choose black or white. Now, the odd thing about that is in the US, the white version has a $10 premium attached to it, but here in Canada, it doesn't. So I don't understand, but that math does not add up. Now, in the temperature testing, the 275R Airflow did really well in its stock configuration, but based off of my testing, it still might be worth adding that one additional exhaust fan along the top. Or on the other hand, if you're planning to use an AIO, just stick it on the top and you're good to go. Well, that's all I got for this one. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're still watching, please hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified whenever I drop a new video. Please follow me on Twitter at HFG_YT. I also have a Discord server. The link is in the description below. It is a good place to get in contact with me if you need help on anything technical, or if you actually have some ideas on videos. I'm always up for doing fan-made videos. And of course, as always, thank you for watching and see you next time.